The American West. The very name conjures images of unbridled freedom, lawless chaos, and justice dispensed solely by the barrel of a six-shooter. Hollywood has painted a picture of the Wild West, an era stretching roughly from 1865 to 1912, where anarchy reigned supreme. But what if I told you that is mostly a myth? The truth is, the West was far from lawless. It was, in fact, governed by some of the most reactive, contradictory, and often downright bizarre legal codes in American history. As populations exploded into boom towns built on mining, like Tombstone, or on cattle drives, like Dodge City, the speed of growth overwhelmed any existing legal structure. The judicial systems were often disorganized, erratic, and sometimes even arbitrary. To fix this, the local business owners, the true architects of frontier stability, pushed for town incorporation. They bypassed the slow territorial and state legislative processes and created immediate, highly specific local ordinances. These were not abstract legal theories. They were urgent, localized fixes, often a direct reaction to a single, disastrous, or embarrassing incident. They were laws of economic necessity, designed to protect commercial stability above all else. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this forgotten legal history and explore 15 bizarre Wild West laws that reveal a far stranger and more complicated frontier than you've ever seen on screen. From mandatory teeth to outright gun bans, these laws prove that the real West was always stranger than the fiction. Part 1. The Anti-Myth Laws, Controlling Weapons and Violence. The first and most striking contradiction between the myth and the historical reality of the Wild West lies in how seriously the towns took gun control. Forget the image of the constantly armed cowboy. Community leaders of the 1870s and 1880s understood that more guns in more places led not to greater safety, but to greater death. Law 1. The Tombstone Disarmament Mandate. Perhaps the most famous example is Tombstone, Arizona Territory's Ordinance Number 9, enacted in April 1881. This law made it flatly unlawful to carry in the hand or upon the person, or otherwise any deadly weapon within the limits of said city of Tombstone without first obtaining a permit in writing. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a mandatory weapon check-in policy. The ordinance allowed visitors to carry their weapons only if they were, with good faith and within reasonable time, are proceeding to deposit or take from the place of deposit such deadly weapon. The gunfight near the OK Corral. It was fundamentally a law enforcement action. The Earp faction was attempting to disarm the McClorys and Clantons for violating this specific municipal ordinance. In a commercial boomtown, public safety and business interests always trumped the right to unrestrained firearm carry. Law 2. Dodge City's Pistol Ban. The Tombstone Mandate was far from unique. Established cattle towns like Dodge City, Abilene, and Deadwood maintained similar, if not identical, restrictions that required visitors to deposit their weapons upon arrival. By the 1880s, many town leaders believed the best remedy for gun violence was no less than a total ban on pistol packing within city limits. These regulations worked. The most famously violent cow towns recorded remarkably few killings by six-shooters, which suggests the ordinances were aggressively enforced to stabilize the environment for the merchants who relied on the smooth flow of the cattle trade. Law 3. Forbidden shooting guns in celebration. Beyond public carry, many frontier communities had specific ordinances that forbade the discharge of firearms within city limits, sometimes even specifically outlawing shooting in celebration. While we've been taught to glorify celebratory gunfire in westerns, the reality was that these shots posed a significant danger to both property and life due to falling bullets. This was a common-sense measure reflecting the low tolerance for random, alcohol-fueled violence in crowded settlements. The fact that the law targeted celebratory acts rather than just defensive ones underscores the municipal priority of controlling environmental noise and accidental injury. Law 4. The Mandatory Arming Statute. Here is where the legal paradox comes in. Despite strict prohibitions on public carry, a different set of statutes in some territories and states required citizens, particularly property owners, to actually possess firearms at home. This regulation illustrates a crucial distinction in frontier legal thought. The right to own a weapon for personal and civic defense, say militia duty or protection against animals, was recognized, especially when the gun was kept on one's property. However, the right to publicly carry that same weapon for immediate confrontation within an incorporated town was strictly regulated. The law essentially bifurcated gun ownership between defensive utility in the wilderness and public liability within town borders. Folks, if you're enjoying this dive into the forgotten laws of the Old West, take a quick second to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep uncovering and sharing these fascinating, lesser-known details of history with this community. It truly makes a difference. Part 2. Governing Vice, Moral Codes, and Blue Laws. Frontier boomtowns had what could be called a moral schizophrenia. They were heavily reliant on revenue generated by vice, gambling, liquor, and prostitution, but simultaneously tried to impose a veneer of respectability to attract families and permanent capital. This resulted in some highly specific moral regulations, often referred to as blue laws. Law 5. The Midnight Dance Curfew. Abilene, Kansas, a major cattle shipping point, outlawed public dancing in its saloons after midnight. This was a classic blue law intended to rein in the wild atmosphere of saloons during the rowdiest hours and encourage public sobriety. This was a clear signal to potential settlers that the town was making an effort toward civility. Lawmen like Wild Bill Hickok actively enforced these curfews, proving they were genuine attempts at public order. Law 6. Prohibition of Sunday gambling. Even the infamous mining hubs such as Virginia City, Nevada, known the world over for their gambling halls, enforced ordinances that banned games on Sundays. This prohibition reflects the surprising religious element present even in the most hardened frontier towns, promoting religious observance and rest. Of course, historical accounts tell us that this often resulted in a flurry of creative ways to skirt the rules and keep the games running behind closed doors. Law 7. The ban on women in saloons. In towns like Dodge City, ordinances were passed prohibiting women from entering saloons unless they were actively employed there. Ostensibly, this was designed to uphold moral standards and reinforce the rigid gender roles of the era. However, the law had a critical dual function. By barring respectable women, it effectively confined the population of women who did frequent saloons, the dance hall girls, singers, and ladies of the night, to the concentrated vice district. This law simultaneously policed morality and managed the geographically concentrated adult trade. Law 8. Fines for public solicitation. Dodge City Ordinance No. 70 from 1883 focused on the public face of prostitution. Section 3 mandated fines of not less than $5 nor more than $50 for any person found in a public place for the purpose of plying or advertising her or their calling or business. This small, recurrent fine structure reveals the city's true intent was not to eliminate prostitution but to monetize it. By imposing manageable penalties, the city ensured a sustainable revenue stream, essentially a licensing fee or tax on vice, to fund law enforcement. The enforcement was often highly political, with Mayor Larry Dager actually weaponizing the ordinance to target female employees of the Long Branch Saloon, which was owned by his political rival. These bizarre regulations were often just instruments of economic warfare and power struggles. Part 3. Public Decency, Hygiene, and Property Protection. Rapidly built, transient boomtowns required highly specific micro-regulations to manage immediate environmental and property hazards. Law 9. Ban on horse mule in upper floors. In Cripple Creek, Colorado, a law made it illegal to bring a horse or pack mule above the ground floor of any building. This hyper-specific ordinance was a direct legislative response to the certainty of property damage. The law was almost certainly passed immediately after a mule or a horse, likely led upstairs either by a drunken cowboy or as a prank, caused serious structural damage to the flimsy wooden architecture of the boomtown. It stands as a testament to the intensely practical, reactionary nature of frontier legislation. Law 10. No bathing in livestock troughs. In towns like Deadwood, South Dakota, residents faced fines for bathing in public water troughs. This was a critical public health and resource management mandate. Public troughs were reserved for livestock and as a communal source of potable water. Using them for personal hygiene risked spreading disease and contaminating the limited precious water supply. This seemingly minor restriction was actually a major component of frontier sanitation policy. Law 11. The one-tooth minimum. Tombstone, Arizona, is cited in historical records as having an alleged ordinance that made it illegal for men and women over 18 to have less than one visible tooth when smiling. While it's difficult to verify as a regularly enforced statute, it's consistently mentioned in local accounts. The mandate served a clear social purpose. It acted as an appearance-based filter. The lack of teeth was a visible sign of extreme destitution and poor health. By requiring a minimum level of dental appearance, the town attempted to curb vagrancy and project an image of respectability to investors and new settlers, differentiating the permanent citizens from the transient riff-raff. Law 12. Prohibiting public building feather dusting. In Clarendon, Texas, a local ordinance made it illegal to dust any public building using a feather duster. This law addressed a persistent environmental issue in arid, unpaved towns: dust. Feather dusters merely scatter fine dust particles into the air, contributing to poor municipal air quality and general filth. The ordinance likely mandated proper cleaning techniques, such as wet sweeping, to ensure basic standards of public hygiene and dust control were met within government or commercial structures. Part 4. Legal anomalies and regulatory overreach. Beyond local municipal governance, the state and territorial laws often retained or adopted legal anomalies that appear utterly bizarre when applied to the realities of the American West. Law 13. Illegal to catch a fish with a lasso. It was, and in some jurisdictions technically still remains, illegal to catch a fish using a lasso. This law has been cited in states that were part of the frontier, including Texas and Utah. The sheer absurdity of the method is the law's hallmark. While some local lore suggests this rule was enacted to discourage fishermen from wildly exaggerating their catches, literally penalizing bearing false witness about their tall tales, it also served as a conservation or anti-poaching measure against methods considered unsportsmanlike or overly efficient. Law 14. Birds have right-of-way on highways. In Utah, birds were given the legal right-of-way on all highways. This law, often cited in lists of historical state peculiarities, reflects early and rather clumsy attempts at regulating traffic and interactions with the natural world on newly demarcated territorial roads. While impractical, it stands as an early form of territorial wildlife protection, acknowledging that settlers needed to adapt to the environmental realities of the West. Law 15. The Conjugal Crime Responsibility. A unique, archaic legal holdover in Utah stated that the husband was responsible for every criminal act committed by his wife while she was in his presence. This law is a direct import from the outdated English common law doctrine of coverture, where the husband assumed the legal identity of his wife. Its preservation in the Utah territory demonstrates the legal immaturity of frontier governance. Lacking sophisticated legislative bodies, territories often defaulted to adopting and thus unintentionally preserving ancient legal principles that were already becoming obsolete in the eastern states. These weren't the laws of a chaotic, savage land, but the frantic, very human attempts of boomtowns to impose order, protect commerce, and achieve some semblance of civility through highly specific and often strange regulations. The biggest takeaway from all of this is that the Wild West was not defined by the absence of law, but by the overwhelming number of intensely local and often contradictory laws that were created to manage an impossibly fast-growing society. What do you think was the most surprising or strangest law we discussed today? The one-tooth minimum, the midnight dance curfew, or the law about horses upstairs? Let us know in the comments below and tell us which of these rules you think made the most sense for keeping order in a rough frontier town. Your feedback really matters to us. We enjoy reading the majority of the comments, and your opinions help guide our future videos. If you like this video, be sure to check out some more history we've covered. And please remember to like, comment, and subscribe before you go. If you enjoyed this video, you'll certainly enjoy the one in the top left corner of your screen right now.